A Preface to Pygmalion, a Professor of Phonetics. As will be seen later on, Pygmalion needs not a preface but a sequel, which I have supplied in its due place. The English have no respect for their language, and will not teach their children to speak it. They spell it so abominably that no man can teach himself what it sounds like. It is impossible for an Englishman to open his mouth without making some other Englishman hate or despise him. German and Spanish are accessible to foreigners. English is not accessible even to Englishmen. The reformer England needs today is an energetic phonetic enthusiast. That is why I have made such a one the hero of a popular play. There have been heroes of that kind crying in the wilderness for many years past. When I became interested in the subject toward the end of the 1870s, Melville Bell was dead, but Alexander J. Ellis was still a living patriarch with an impressive head always covered by a velvet skull-cap, for which he would apologize to public meetings in a very courtly manner. He and Tito Pagliardini, another phonetic veteran, were men whom it was impossible to dislike. Henry Sweet, then a young man, lacked their sweetness of character. He was about as conciliatory to conventional morals as Ibsen or Samuel Butler. His great ability as a phonetician, he was, I think, the best of them all at his job, would have entitled him to high official recognition, and perhaps enabled him to popularize his subject, but for his satanic contempt for all academic dignitaries and persons in general who thought more of Greek than of phonetics. Once, in the days when the Imperial Institute rose in South Kensington, and Joseph Chamberlain was booming the empire, I induced the editor of a leading monthly review to commission an article from Sweet on the imperial importance of his subject. When it arrived, it contained nothing but a savagely derisive attack on a professor of language and literature whose chair Sweet regarded as proper to a phonetic expert only. The article, being libellous, had to be returned as impossible, and I had to renounce my dream of dragging its author into the limelight. When I met him afterwards, for the first time in many years, I found to my astonishment that he, who had been a quite tolerably presentable young man, had actually managed by sheer scorn to alter his personal appearance, until he had become a sort of walking repudiation of Oxford and all its traditions. It must have been largely in his own, despite that he was squeezed into something called a readership of phonetics there. The future of phonetics rests probably with his pupils, who all swore by him, but nothing could bring the man himself into any sort of compliance with the university, to which he nevertheless clung by divine right in an intensely Oxonian way. I dare say his papers, if he has left any, include some satires that may be published without too destructive results 50 years hence. He was, I believe, not in the least an ill-natured man, very much the opposite, I should say, but he would not suffer fools gladly. Those who knew him will recognize in my third act the allusion to the patent shorthand in which he used to write postcards, and which may be acquired from a 4 and 6-penny manual published by the Clarendon Press. The postcards which Mrs. Higgins describes are such as I have received from Sweet. I would decipher a sound which a Cockney would represent by "zur," and a Frenchman by "sieur," and then write demanding with some heat what on earth it meant. Sweet, with boundless contempt for my stupidity, would reply that it not only meant, but obviously was, the word result, as no other word containing that sound and capable of making sense with the context existed in any language spoken on earth. That less expert mortals should require fuller indications was beyond Sweet's patience. Therefore, though the whole point of his current shorthand is that it can express every sound in the language perfectly, vowels as well as consonants, and that your hand has to make no stroke except the easy and current ones with which you write M, N, and U, L, P, and Q, scribbling them at whatever angle comes easiest to you, his unfortunate determination to make this remarkable and quite legible script serve also as a shorthand reduced it in his own practice to the most inscrutable of cryptograms. His true objective was the provision of a full, accurate, legible script for our noble but ill-dressed language, but he was led past that by his contempt for the popular Pitman system of shorthand, which he called the pitfall system. The triumph of Pitman was a triumph of business organization. There was a weekly paper to persuade you to learn Pitman. There were cheap textbooks and exercise books and transcripts of speeches for you to copy, and schools where experienced teachers coached you up to the necessary proficiency. Sweet could not organize his market in that fashion. He might as well have been the Sibyl who tore up the leaves of prophecy that nobody would attend to. The 4 and 6-penny manual, mostly in his lithographed handwriting, that was never vulgarly advertised, may some day perhaps be taken up by a syndicate and pushed upon the public as the Times pushed the Encyclopaedia Britannica. But until then it will certainly not prevail against Pitman. I have bought 3 copies of it during my lifetime, and I am informed by the publishers that its cloistered existence is still a steady and healthy one. I actually learned the system 2 several times, and yet the shorthand in which I am writing these lines is Pitman's, and the reason is that my secretary cannot transcribe Sweet, having been perforce taught in the schools of Pitman. Therefore Sweet railed at Pitman as vainly as Thersites railed at Ajax. His raillery, however it may have eased his soul, gave no popular vogue to current shorthand. Pygmalion Higgins is not a portrait of Sweet, to whom the adventure of Eliza Doolittle would have been impossible. Still, as will be seen, there are touches of Sweet in the play. With Higgins's physique and temperament, Sweet might have set the Thames on fire. As it was, he impressed himself professionally on Europe to an extent that made his comparative personal obscurity, and the failure of Oxford to do justice to his eminence, a puzzle to foreign specialists in his subject. I do not blame Oxford, because I think Oxford quite right in demanding a certain social amenity from its nurslings. Heaven knows it is not exorbitant in its requirements. For although I well know how hard it is for a man of genius with a seriously underrated subject to maintain serene and kindly relations with the men who underrate it, and who keep all the best places for less important subjects which they profess without originality and sometimes without much capacity for them, still, if he overwhelms them with wrath and disdain, he cannot expect them to heap honours on him. Of the later generations of phoneticians I know little. Among them towers the poet laureate, to whom perhaps Higgins may owe his Miltonic sympathies, though here again I must disclaim all portraiture. But if the play makes the public aware that there are such people as phoneticians, and that they are among the most important people in England at present, it will serve its turn. I wish to boast that Pygmalion has been an extremely successful play all over Europe and North America, as well as at home. It is so intensely and deliberately didactic, and its subject is esteemed so dry, that I delight in throwing it at the heads of the wiseacres who repeat the parrot cry that art should never be didactic. It goes to prove my contention that art should never be anything else. Finally, and for the encouragement of people troubled with accents that cut them off from all high employment, I may add that the change wrought by Professor Higgins in the Flower Girl is neither impossible nor uncommon. The modern concierge's daughter who fulfills her ambition by playing the Queen of Spain in Ruy Blas at the Théâtre Français is only one of many thousands of men and women who have sloughed off their native dialects and acquired a new tongue. But the thing has to be done scientifically, or the last state of the aspirant may be worse than the first. An honest and natural slum dialect is more tolerable than the attempt of a phonetically untaught person to imitate the vulgar dialect of the golf club, and I am sorry to say that in spite of the efforts of our Academy of Dramatic Art, there is still too much sham golfing English on our stage, and too little of the noble English of Forbes Robertson.
End to the preface of Pygmalion. The cast for this dramatic reading of Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw are as follows. The narrator was read by Kirsten Ferreri and Mary Anderson. Daughter, Miss Eynsford Hill, read by Susie G. Mother, Mrs. Eynsford Hill, read by Gesine. Bystander, read by Peter Yearsley. Freddy Eynsford Hill, read by ianish. The Flower Girl, Eliza Doolittle, read by Kristin Hughes. Gentleman, Captain Pickering, read by Martin Clifton. The Note-Taker, Professor Henry Higgins, read by Alex Foster. Sarcastic Bystander, read by Peter Yearsley. Mrs. Pearce, read by Christiane Levesque. Mr. Doolittle, read by David Barnes. Mrs. Higgins, read by Larysa Jaworski. Parlour-Maid, read by Linda Wilcox. File editor and director David Lawrence. End of preface to Pygmalion. Act 1.
Covent Garden at 11:15 p.m. Torrents of heavy summer rain, cab whistles blowing frantically in all directions, pedestrians running for shelter into the market and under the portico of St. Paul's Church, where there are already several people, among them a lady and her daughter in evening dress. They are all peering out gloomily at the rain, except one man with his back turned to the rest, who seems wholly preoccupied with a notebook in which he is writing busily. The church clock strikes the first quarter.
I'm getting chilled to the bone. What can Freddy be doing all this time? He's been gone 20 minutes.
Not so long. But he ought to have got us a cab by this.
You won't get no cab, not until 11:30, missus. Then they come back after dropping their theatre fares.
But we must have a cab. We can't stand here until 11:30. It's too bad.
Well, it ain't my fault, missus.
If Freddy had a bit of gumption, he would have got one at the theatre door.
What could he have done, poor boy?
Other people got cabs. Why couldn't he?
Freddy rushes in out of the rain from the Southampton Street side, and comes between them closing a dripping umbrella. He is a young man of 20 in evening dress, very wet around the ankles.
Well, haven't you got a cab?
There's not one to be had for love or money.
Oh, Freddy, there must be one. You can't have tried.
Too tiresome. Do you expect us to go and get one ourselves?
I tell you, they're all engaged. The rain was so sudden, nobody was prepared. And everybody had to take a cab. I've been to Charing Cross one way and nearly to Ludgate Circus the other. And they were all engaged.
Did you try Trafalgar Square?
There wasn't one at Trafalgar Square.
Did you try?
I tried as far as Charing Cross Station. Did you expect me to walk to Hammersmith?
You haven't tried at all.
You really are very helpless, Freddy. Go again, and don't come back until you have found a cab.
I shall simply get soaked for nothing.
And what about us? Are we to stay here all night in this draught with next to nothing on? You selfish pig.
Oh, very well. I'll go.
He opens his umbrella and dashes off strandwards, but comes into collision with a flower girl, who is hurrying in for shelter, knocking her basket out of her hands.
Now then, Freddy, look where you're going, dear.
Sorry.
There's manners for you. 2 bunches of violets trod in the mud.
She sits down on the plinth of the column, sorting her flowers, on the lady's right. She is not at all an attractive person. She is perhaps 18, perhaps 20, hardly older. She wears a little sailor hat of black straw that has been long exposed to the dust and soot of London, and has seldom, if ever, been brushed. Her hair needs washing rather badly. Its mousy colour can hardly be natural. She wears a shoddy black coat that reaches nearly to her knees and is shaped to her waist. She has a brown skirt with a coarse apron. Her boots are much the worse for wear. She is no doubt as clean as she can afford to be, but compared to the ladies she is very dirty. Her features are no worse than theirs, but their condition leaves something to be desired, and she needs the services of a dentist.
How do you know that my son's name is Freddy, pray?
Oh, he's your son, is he? Well, if you'd done your duty by him as a mother should, he'd know better than to spoil poor girl's flowers and run away without paying. Will you pay me for 'em?
Do nothing of the sort, Mother. The idea.
Please allow me, Clara. Have you any pennies?
No. I've nothing smaller than 6pence.
I'll give you change for a tenner, kind lady.
Give it to me. Now, this is for your flowers.
Thank you kindly, lady.
Make her give you the change. These things are only a penny a bunch.
Do hold your tongue, Clara. You can keep the change.
Oh, thank you, lady.
Now, tell me how you know that young gentleman's name.
I didn't.
I heard you call him by it. Don't try to deceive me.
Who's trying to deceive you? I call him Freddy or Charlie, same as you might yourself if you was talking to a stranger and wish to be pleasant.
6pence thrown away. Really, Mamma, you might have spared Freddy that.
An elderly gentleman of the amiable military type rushes into shelter, and closes a dripping umbrella. He is in the same plight as Freddy, very wet about the ankles. He is in evening dress, with a light overcoat. He takes the place left vacant by the daughter's retirement.
Phew.
Oh, sir, is there any sign of its stopping?
I'm afraid not. It started worse than ever about 2 minutes ago.
Oh, dear.
If it's worse, it's a sign it's nearly over. So cheer up, Captain, and buy a flower for poor girl.
I'm sorry, I haven't any change.
I'll give you change, Captain.
For a sovereign, I've nothing less.
Oh, do buy a flower off me, Captain. I can change half a crown. Take this for twopence.
Now, don't be troublesome, there's a good girl. I really haven't any change. Stop, here's 3 halfpence, if that's any use to you.
Thank you, sir.
You be careful. Give him a flower for it. There's a bloke here behind, taking down every blessed word you're saying.
I ain't done nothing wrong by speaking to the gentleman. I've a right to sell flowers if I keep off the cab. I'm a respectable girl, so help me. I never spoke to him except to ask him to buy a flower off me. Oh, sir, don't let him charge me. You know what it means to me. They'll take away me character and drive me out on the street for speaking to a gentleman.
There. Who's hurting you, you silly girl? What do you take me for?
It's all right. He's a gentleman. Look at his boots. She thought you was a copper's nark, sir.
What's a copper's nark?
It's a copper's nark, as you might say. What else would you call it? A sort of informer.
I take my Bible oath I never said a word.
Oh, shut up. Do I look like a policeman?
Then what you take down my words for? How I know whether you took me down right? You just show me what you wrote about me. What's that? That ain't proper writing. I can't read that.
I can. Cheer up, Captain. Now haul your flower for poor girl.
Because I call him Captain. I meant no harm. Oh, sir, don't let him lay a charge against me for a word like that. You...
Charge? I make no charge. Really, sir, if you're a detective, you need not begin protecting me against molestation by young women until I ask you. Anybody could see that the girl meant no harm.
Of course they could. What business is it of yours? You mind your own affairs. He wants promotion, he does. Taking down people's words. Girl never said a word to him. What harm if she did? Nice thing a girl can't shelter from the rain without being insulted. He ain't a tech. He's a blooming busybody, that's what he is. I tell you, look at his boots.
And how are all your people down at Chelsea?
Who told you my people come from Chelsea?
Never you mind. They did. How do you come to be up so far east? You were born in Lisson Grove.
Oh, what harm is there in my leaving Lisson Grove? It wasn't fit for a pig living. And I had to pay 4 and 6 away.
Live where you like, but stop that noise.
Come, he can't touch you. You have a right to live where you please.
Park Lane, for instance? I'd like to go into the house in question with you, I would.
I'm a good girl, I am.
Do you know where I come from?
Hoxton.
Well, who said I didn't? Blimey, you know everything, you do.
Ain't no cool man with me, ain't?
Of course he ain't. Don't you stand it from him. See here, what call have you to know about people what never offered to meddle with you? Where's your warrant? Yes, where's your warrant?
Let him say what he likes. I don't want to have no truck with him.
You take us for dirt under your feet, don't you? Catch you taking liberties with a gentleman. Yes, tell him where he come from if you want to go fortune-telling.
Cheltenham, Harrow, Cambridge, and India.
Quite right. May I ask, sir, do you do this for your living at a music hall?
I've thought of that. Maybe I shall some day.
The rain has stopped, and the persons on the outside of the crowd begin to drop off.
He's no gentleman, he ain't, who interfere with a poor girl.
What on earth is Freddy doing? I shall get pneumonia if I stay in this draught any longer.
Earl's Court.
Will you please keep your impertinent remarks to yourself?
Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to. I beg your pardon. Your mother's Epsom, unmistakably.
How very curious. I was brought up in Large Lady Park, near Epsom.
What a devil of a name. Excuse me. You want a cab, do you?
Don't dare speak to me.
Oh, please, Clara. We should be so grateful to you, sir, if you found us a cab.
The note-taker produces a whistle.
Oh, thank you.
The note-taker blows a piercing blast.
There, I knowed he was a plain-clothes copper. That ain't a police whistle. That's a sporting whistle.
He's no right to take away me character. Me character's same to me as any lady's.
I don't know whether you've noticed it, but the rain stopped about 2 minutes ago.
So it has. Why didn't you say so before? And us losing our time listening to your silliness. I can tell where you come from. You come from Hanwell. Go back there.
Hanwell.
Thank you, teacher. Ha ha. So long.
Frightening people like that, how he like himself.
It's quite fine now, Clara. We can walk to a motor bus. Come.
She gathers her skirts above her ankles and hurries off toward the Strand.
But the cab! Oh, how tiresome!
She follows angrily. All the rest have gone except the note-taker, the gentleman, and the flower-girl, who sits arranging her basket, and still pitying herself in murmurs.
Poor girl, I'd enough for to live without being worried and chivied.
How do you do it, if I may ask?
Simply phonetics, the science of speech. That's my profession, also my hobby. Happy is the man who can make a living by his hobby. You can spot an Irishman or a Yorkshireman by his brogue. I can place any man within 6 miles. I can place him within 2 miles in London, sometimes within 2 streets.
Or be ashamed of himself, a manly coward.
But is there a living in that?
Oh yes, quite a fat one. This is an age of upstarts. Men begin in Kentish Town with £80 a year, and end in Park Lane with 100,000. They want to drop Kentish Town, but they give themselves away every time they open their mouths. Now I can teach them.
Let him mind his own business and leave a poor girl.
Woman, cease this detestable boo-hooing instantly, or else seek the shelter of some other place of worship.
I've a right to be here if I like, same as you.
A woman who utters such depressing and disgusting sounds has no right to be anywhere, no right to live. Remember that you are a human being with a soul and the divine gift of articulate speech, that your native language is the language of Shakespeare and Milton and the Bible, and don't sit there crooning like a bilious pigeon.
Ow!
Heavens, what a sound! Ow!
God!
You see this creature with her curbstone English, the English that will keep her in the gutter to the end of her days. Well, sir, in 3 months I could pass that girl off as a duchess at an ambassador's garden party. I could even get her a place as a lady's maid or shop assistant, which requires better English. That's the sort of thing I do for commercial millionaires, and on the profits of it I do genuine scientific work in phonetics, and a little as a poet on Miltonic lines.
I am myself a student of Indian dialects, and...
Are you? Do you know Colonel Pickering, the author of Spoken Sanskrit?
I am Colonel Pickering. Who are you?
Henry Higgins, author of Higgins' Universal Alphabet.
I came from India to meet you.
I was going to India to meet you.
Where do you live?
27A Wimpole Street. Come and see me tomorrow.
I'm at the Carlton. Come with me now and let's have a jaw over some supper.
Right you are.
Got a flower, kind gentleman. I'm short for my lodging.
I really haven't any change, I'm sorry.
Liar, you said you could change half a crown.
You ought be stuffed with nails, you ought. Take the whole bloomin' basket for 6pence.
The church clock strikes the 2nd quarter.
A reminder.
He raises his hat solemnly, then throws a handful of money into the basket, and follows Pickering.
Picking up a half-crown.
Ow!
Picking up a couple of florins.
Ow!
Picking up several coins.
Ow!
Picking up a half-sovereign.
Ow!
Freddy springs out of a taxicab.
Got one at last. Hello. Where are the 2 ladies that were here?
They walked the bus when the rain stopped.
And left me with a cab on my hands. Damnation.
Never you mind, young man. I'm going home in a taxi.
She sails off to the cab. The driver puts his hand behind him and holds the door firmly shut against her. Quite understanding his mistrust, she shows him her handful of money.
8pence ain't no object to me, Charlie. Angel Court, Drury Lane, round the corner of Mick and John's oil shop. Let's see how fast you can make her up it.
Well, I'm dashed.
End of Act 1. This recording is in the public domain. Act 2.
Next day at 11 a.m. Higgins' laboratory in Wimpole Street. It is a room on the first floor, looking on the street, and was meant for the drawing-room. The double doors are in the middle of the back hall, and persons entering find in the corner to their right 2 tall file cabinets at right angles to one another against the walls. In this corner stands a flat writing table, on which are a phonograph, a laryngoscope, a row of tiny organ pipes with a bellows, a set of lamp chimneys for singing flames with burners attached to a gas plug in the wall by an india-rubber tube, several tuning forks of different sizes, a life-size image of half a human head, showing in section the vocal organs, and a box containing a supply of wax cylinders for the phonograph. Further down the room on the same side is a fireplace, with a comfortable leather-covered easy-chair at the side of the hearth nearest the door, and a coal-scuttle. There is a clock on the mantelpiece. Between the fireplace and the phonograph table is a stand for newspapers. On the other side of the central door, to the left of the visitor, is a cabinet of shallow drawers. On it is a telephone and the telephone directory. The corner beyond, and most of the side wall, is occupied by a grand piano, with the keyboard at the end furthest from the door, and a bench for the player extending the full length of the keyboard. On the piano is a dessert dish heaped with fruit and sweets, mostly chocolates. The middle of the room is clear. Besides the easy-chair, the piano bench, and 2 chairs at the phonograph table, there is one stray chair. It stands near the fireplace. On the walls, engravings, mostly Pyrenees and mezzotint portraits. No paintings. Pickering is seated at the table, putting down some cards and a tuning fork which he has been using. Higgins is standing up near him, closing 2 or 3 file drawers which are hanging out. He appears in the morning light as a robust, vital, appetizing sort of man of 40 or thereabouts, dressed in a professional-looking black frock-coat with a white linen collar and black silk tie. He is of the energetic, scientific type, heartily, even violently interested in everything that can be studied as a scientific subject, and careless about himself and other people, including their feelings. He is, in fact, but for his years and size, rather like a very impetuous baby, taking notice eagerly and loudly, and requiring almost as much watching to keep him out of unintended mischief. His manner varies from genial bullying when he is in a good humour, to stormy petulance when anything goes wrong. But he is so entirely frank and void of malice that he remains likeable even in his least reasonable moments.
Well, I think that's the whole show.
It's really amazing. I haven't taken half of it in, you know.
Would you like to go over any of it again?
Rising and coming to the fireplace, where he plants himself with his back to the fire.
No, thank you, not now. I'm quite done up for this morning.
Tired of listening to sounds?
Yes, it's a fearful strain. I rather fancied myself because I can pronounce 24 distinct vowel sounds. But your 130 beat me. I can't hear a bit of difference between most of them.
Oh, that comes with practice. You hear no difference at first, but you keep on listening, and presently you find they're all as different as A from B.
Mrs. Pearce looks in. She is Higgins's housekeeper.
What's the matter?
A young woman wants to see you, sir.
A young woman? What does she want?
Well, sir, she says you'll be glad to see her when you know what she's come about. She's quite a common girl, sir. Very common indeed. I should have sent her away, only I thought perhaps you wanted her to talk into your machines. I hope I've not done wrong, but really you see such queer people sometimes. You'll excuse me, I'm sure, sir.
Oh, that's all right, Mrs. Pearce. Has she an interesting accent?
Oh, something dreadful, sir, really. I don't know how you can take an interest in it.
Let's have her up. Show her up, Mrs. Pearce.
He rushes across to his working table and picks out a cylinder to use on the phonograph.
Very well, sir. It's for you to say.
This is a bit of luck. I'll show you how I make records. We'll set her talking, and then I'll take it down first in Bell's visible speech, then in broad rhomic, and then we'll get her on the phonograph so that you can turn her on as often as you like with the written transcript before you.
This is the young woman, sir.
The flower girl enters in state. She has a hat with 3 ostrich feathers, orange, sky blue, and red. She has a nearly clean apron, and the shoddy coat has been tidied a little. The pathos of this deplorable figure, with its innocent vanity and consequential air, touches Pickering, who has already straightened himself in the presence of Mrs. Pearce. But as to Higgins, the only distinction he makes between men and women is that when he is neither bullying nor exclaiming to the heavens against some featherweight cross, he coaxes women as a coaxes its nurse when it wants to get anything out of her.
Why, this is the girl I jotted down last night. She's no use. I've got all the records I want of Listen Grove lingo, and I'm not going to waste another cylinder on it. Be off with you. I don't want you.
Don't you be so saucy. You ain't heard what I come for yet. Do you tell him I come in a taxi?
Nonsense, girl. What, do you think a gentleman like Mr. Higgins cares what you came in?
Oh, we are proud. He ain't above giving lessons, not him. I heard him say so. Well, I ain't come here to ask for any compliment. And if me money's not good enough, I can go elsewhere.
Good enough for what?
Good enough for you. Now you know, don't you? I'm come to have lessons, I am, and to pay for 'em too, make no mistake.
Well, what do you expect me to say to you?
Well, if you was a gentleman, you might ask me to sit down, I think. Don't I tell you I'm bringing you business?
Pickering, shall we ask this baggage to sit down, or shall we throw her out of the window?
Ow! I won't be called a baggage when I've offered to pay like any lady.
Motionless, the two men stare at her from the other side of the room, amazed.
What is it you want, my girl?
I want to be a lady in a flower shop, instead of selling at the corner of Tottenham Court Road. But they won't take me unless I can talk more genteel. He said he could teach me. Well, here I am, ready to pay him, not asking any favour, and he treats me as if I was dirt.
How can you be such a foolish, ignorant girl as to think you could afford to pay Mr. Higgins?
Why shouldn't I? I know what lessons cost as well as you do, and I'm ready to pay.
How much?
Now you're talking. I thought you'd come off it when you saw a chance of getting back a bit of what you chucked at me last night. You'd had a drop in, hadn't you?
Sit down.
Oh, if you're going to make a compliment of it.
Sit down.
Sit down, girl. Do as you're told.
She places the straight chair near the hearthrug between Higgins and Pickering, and stands behind it, waiting for the girl to sit down.
Oh!
Won't you sit down?
Don't mind if I do.
What's your name?
Liza Doolittle.
Eliza, Elizabeth, Betsy and Bess. They went to the woods to get a bird's nest.
They found a nest with 4 eggs in it.
They took 1 apiece and left 3 in it.
Oh, don't be silly.
You mustn't speak to the gentleman like that.
Well, why won't he speak sensible to me?
Come back to business. How much do you propose to pay me for the lessons?
Oh, I know what's right. A lady friend of mine gets French lessons for 18 pence an hour from a real French gentleman. Well, you wouldn't have the face to ask me the same for teaching me my own language as you would for French, so I won't give more than a shilling. Take it or leave it.
You know, Pickering, if you consider a shilling not as a simple shilling but as a percentage of this girl's income, it works out as fully equivalent to 60 or 70 guineas from a millionaire.
How so?
Figure it out. A millionaire has about £150 a day. She earns about half a crown.
Who told you I only...
She offers me 2/5 of her day's income for a lesson. 2/5 of a millionaire's income for a day would be somewhere about £60. It's handsome. By George, it's enormous. It's the biggest offer I ever had.
£60? What are you talking about? I never offered you £60. Where would I get...
Hold your tongue.
But I ain't got £60. Oh.
Don't cry, you silly girl. Sit down. Nobody is going to touch your money.
Somebody is going to touch you with a broomstick if you don't stop snivelling. Sit down.
Oh! One would think you was my father.
If I decide to teach you, I'll be worse than 2 fathers to you. Here.
He offers her his silk handkerchief.
What's this for?
To wipe your eyes. To wipe any part of your face that feels moist. Remember, that's your handkerchief. And that's your sleeve. Don't mistake one for the other if you wish to become a lady in a shop.
It's no use talking to her like that, Mr. Higgins. She doesn't understand you. Besides, you're quite wrong. She doesn't do it that way at all.
He takes the handkerchief.
Here, you give me that handkerchief. He give it to me, not to you.
Ha, he did. I think it must be regarded as her property, Mrs. Pearce.
Serve you right, Mr. Higgins.
Higgins, I'm interested. What about the ambassador's garden party? I'll say you're the greatest teacher alive if you make that good. I'll bet you all the expenses of the experiment you can't do it, and I'll pay you for the lessons.
Oh, you are real good. Thank you, Captain.
It's almost irresistible. She's so deliciously low, so horribly dirty.
How? I ain't dirty. I washed my face and hands afore I come, I did.
You're certainly not going to turn her head with flattery, Higgins.
Oh, don't say that, sir. There's more ways than one of turning a girl's head, and nobody can do it better than Mr. Higgins, though he may not always mean it. I do hope, sir, you won't encourage him to do anything foolish.
What is life but a series of inspired follies? The difficulty is to find them to do. Never lose a chance. It doesn't come every day. I shall make a duchess of this draggle-tailed gutter-snipe.
Ow!
Yes, in 6 months, in 3 if she has a good ear and a quick tongue, I'll take her anywhere and pass her off as anything. We'll start today, now, this moment. Take her away and clean her, Mrs. Pearce. Monkey brand, if it won't come off any other way. Is there a good fire in the kitchen?
Yes, but...
Take all her clothes off and burn them. Ring up Whiteley or somebody for new ones. Wrap her up in brown paper till they come.
You're no gentleman, you're not, to talk of such things. I'm a good girl, I am, and I know what the like of you are, I do.
We want none of your Liston Grove prudery here, young woman. You've got to learn to behave like a duchess. Take her away, Mrs. Pearce. If she gives you any trouble, wallop her.
No, I'll call the police, I will.
But I've no place to put her.
Put her in the dustbin.
Oh!
Oh, come, Higgins, be reasonable.
You must be reasonable, Mr. Higgins. Really, you must. You can't walk over everybody like this.
I walk over everybody. My dear Mrs. Pearce, my dear Pickering, I never had the slightest intention of walking over anyone. All I propose is that we should be kind to this poor girl. We must help her to prepare and fit herself for her new station in life. If I did not express myself clearly, it was because I did not wish to hurt her delicacy, or yours.
Well, did you ever hear anything like that, sir?
Never, Mrs. Pearce, never.
What's the matter?
Well, the matter is, sir, that you can't take a girl up like that as if you were picking up a pebble on the beach.
Why not?
Why not? But you don't know anything about her. What about her parents? She may be married.
Gone.
There, as the girl very properly says, gone. Married, indeed. Don't you know that a woman of that class looks a worn-out drudge of 50 a year after she's married?
Who'd marry me?
By George, Eliza, the streets will be strewn with the bodies of men shooting themselves for your sake before I've done with you.
Nonsense, sir. You mustn't talk like that to her.
I'm going away. He's off his jump, he is. I don't want no balmies teaching me.
Oh, indeed. I'm mad, am I? Very well, Mrs. Pearce, you needn't order the new clothes for her. Throw her out.
No, you got no right to touch me.
You see now what comes of being saucy. This way, please.
I didn't want no clothes. I wouldn't have taken 'em.
She throws away the handkerchief.
I can buy me own clothes.
Higgins deftly retrieves the handkerchief and intercepts her on her reluctant way to the door.
You're an ungrateful, wicked girl. This is my return for offering to take you out of the gutter, undress you beautifully, and make a lady of you.
Stop, Mr. Higgins. I won't allow it. It's you that are wicked. Go home to your parents, girl, and tell them to take better care of you.
I ain't got no parents. They told me I was big enough to earn me own living and turned me out.
Where's your mother?
I ain't got no mother. Her that turned me out was me sick stepmother, but I done without 'em, and I'm a good girl, I am.
Very well, then, what on earth is all this fuss about? The girl doesn't belong to anybody, is no use to anybody but me. You can adopt her, Mrs. Pearce. I'm sure a daughter would be a great amusement to you. Now don't make any more fuss. Take her downstairs
But what's to become of her? Is she to be paid anything? Do be sensible, sir.
Oh, pay her whatever is necessary. Put it in the housekeeping book. What on earth will she want with money? She'll have her food and her clothes. She'll only drink if you give her money.
Oh, you are a brute. It's a lie. Nobody ever saw a sign of liquor on me.
She goes back to her chair and plants herself there defiantly.
Does it occur to you, Higgins, that the girl has some feelings?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Not any feelings that we need bother about. Have you, Eliza?
I got my feelings, same as anyone else.
You see the difficulty?
Eh? What difficulty?
To get her to talk grammar. The mere pronunciation is easy enough.
I don't want to talk grammar. I want to talk like a lady.
Will you please keep to the point, Mr. Higgins? I want to know on what terms the girl is to be here. Is she to have any wages? And what is to become of her when you've finished your teaching? You must look ahead a little.
What's to become of her if I leave her in the gutter? Tell me that, Mrs. Pearce.
That's her own business, not yours, Mr. Higgins.
Well, when I've done with her, we can throw her back into the gutter. Then it will be her own business again. So that's all right.
Oh, you've no feeling heart in you. You don't care for nothing but yourself. Here, I've had enough of this. I'm going. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, you ought.
Higgins snatches a chocolate cream from the piano, his eyes suddenly beginning to twinkle with mischief.
Have some chocolates, Eliza.
How do I know what might be in 'em? I've heard of girls being drugged by the like of you.
Higgins whips out his penknife, cuts a chocolate in two, puts one half into his mouth and bolts it, and offers her the other half.
Pledge of good faith, Eliza. I eat one half, you eat the other.
Liza opens her mouth to retort. He pops the half chocolate into it.
You shall have boxes of them, barrels of them, every day. You shall live on them,
I wouldn't have ate it, only I'm too ladylike to take it out of me mouth.
Listen, Eliza, I think that you said you came in a taxi.
Well, what if I did? I've as good a right to take a taxi as anyone else.
You have, Eliza, and in future you shall have as many taxis as you want. You shall go up and down and round the town in a taxi every day. Think of that, Eliza.
Mr. Higgins, you're tempting the girl. It's not right. She should think of the future.
At her age? Nonsense. Time enough to think of the future when you haven't any future to think of. No, Eliza, do as this lady does. Think of other people's futures, but never think of your own. Think of chocolates and taxis and gold and diamonds.
No, I don't want no gold and no diamonds. I'm a good girl, I am.
She sits down again with an attempt at dignity.
You shall remain so, Eliza, under the care of Mrs. Pearce, and you shall marry an officer in the Guards with a beautiful moustache, the son of a marquis, who will disinherit him for marrying you, but will relent when he sees your beauty and goodness.
Excuse me, Higgins, but I really must interfere. Mrs. Pearce is quite right. If this girl is to put herself in your hands for 6 months for an experiment in teaching, she must understand thoroughly what she's doing.
How can she? She's incapable of understanding anything. Besides, do any of us understand what we're doing? If we did, would we ever do it?
Very clever, Higgins, but not sound sense. Miss Doolittle?
Oh!
There. That's all you get out of Eliza. Ah, whoa! No use explaining. As a military man, you ought to know that. Give her her orders. That's what she wants. Eliza, you are to live here for the next 6 months, learning how to speak beautifully like a lady in a florist's shop. If you're good and do whatever you're told, you shall sleep in a proper bedroom and have lots to eat, and money to buy chocolates and take rides in taxis. If you're naughty and idle, you will sleep in the back kitchen among the black beetles, and be walloped by Mrs. Pearce with a broomstick. At the end of 6 months, you shall go to Buckingham Palace in a carriage, beautifully dressed. If the king finds out you're not a lady, you will be taken by the police to the Tower of London, where your head will be cut off as a warning to other presumptuous flower girls. If you're not found out, you shall have a present of 7 and 6pence to start life with as a lady in a shop. If you refuse this offer, you will be a most ungrateful and wicked girl, and the angels will weep with you. Now, are you satisfied, Pickering? Can I put it more plainly and fairly, Mrs. Pearce?
I think you'd better let me speak to the girl properly in private. I don't know that I can take charge of her or consent to the arrangement at all. Of course, I know you don't mean her any harm. But when you get what you call interested in people's accents, you never think or care what may happen to them or you. Come with me, Eliza.
That's all right. Thank you, Mrs. Pearce. Bundle her off to the bathroom.
You're a great bully, you are. I won't stay here if I don't like it. I won't let nobody wallop me. I never asked to go to Buckingham Palace, I didn't. I was never in trouble with the police, not me. I'm a good girl.
Don't answer back, girl. You don't understand the gentleman. Come with me.
She leads the way to the door and holds it open for Eliza.
As she goes out,
Well, what I say is right. I won't go near the king, not if I'm going to have my head cut off. If I'd known what I was letting myself in for, I wouldn't have come here. I've always been a good girl. I never offered to say a word to him, and I don't owe him nothing, and I don't care, and I won't be put upon, and I have my feelings same as anyone else.
Mrs. Pearce shuts the door, and Eliza's plaints are no longer audible. Pickering comes from the hearth to the chair and sits astride it with his arms on the back.
Excuse the straight question, Higgins. Are you a man of good character where women are concerned?
Have you ever met a man of good character where women are concerned?
Yes, very frequently.
Well, I haven't. I find that the moment I let a woman make friends with me, she becomes jealous, exacting, suspicious, and a damned nuisance. I find that the moment I let myself make friends with a woman, I become selfish and tyrannical. Women upset everything. When you let them into your life, you find that the woman is driving at one thing and you're driving at another.
At what, for example?
Oh, Lord knows. I suppose the woman wants to live her own life and the man wants to live his, and each tries to drag the other onto the wrong track. One wants to go north and the other south, and the result is that both have to go east, though they both hate the east wind. So, here I am, a confirmed old bachelor, and likely to remain so.
Come, Higgins, you know what I mean. If I'm to be in this business, I shall feel responsible for the girl. I hope it's understood that no advantage is to be taken of her position.
What? That thing? Sacred, I assure you. You see, she'll be a pupil, and teaching would be impossible unless pupils were sacred. I've taught scores of American millionairesses how to speak English, the best-looking women in the world. I'm seasoned. They might as well be blocks of wood. I might as well be a block of wood. It's...
Mrs. Pearce opens the door. She has Eliza's hat in her hand. Pickering retires to the easy-chair and sits down.
Well, Mrs. Pearce, is it all right?
I just wish to trouble you with a word, if I may, Mr. Higgins.
Yes, certainly. Come in. Don't burn that, Mrs. Pearce. I'll keep it as a curiosity.
He takes the hat.
Handle it carefully, sir, please. I had to promise her not to burn it, but I had better put it in the oven for a while.
Putting it down hastily on the piano.
Thank you. Well, what have you to say to me?
Am I in the way?
Not at all, sir. Mr. Higgins, will you please be very particular what you say before the girl?
Of course. I'm always particular about what I say. Why do you say this to me?
No, sir, you're not at all particular when you've mislaid anything, or when you get a little impatient. Now, it doesn't matter before me. I'm used to it. But you really must not swear before the girl.
I swear? I never swear. I detest the habit. What the devil do you mean?
That's what I mean, sir. You swear a great deal too much. I don't mind your damning and blasting and what the devil and where the devil and who the devil...
Really, Mrs. Pearce, this language from your lips...
But there is a certain word I must ask you not to use. The girl has just used it herself because the bath was too hot. It begins with the same letter as bath. She knows no better. She learnt it at her mother's knee. But she must not hear it from your lips.
I cannot charge myself with having ever uttered it, Mrs. Pearce.
She looks at him steadfastly. He adds, hiding an uneasy conscience with a judicial air,
Except perhaps in a moment of extreme and justifiable excitement.
Only this morning, sir, you applied it to your boots, to the butter, and to the brown bread.
Oh, that. Mere alliteration, Mrs. Pearce, natural to a poet.
Well, sir, whatever you choose to call it, I beg you not to let the girl hear you repeat it.
Oh, very well, very well. Is that all?
No, sir. We shall have to be very particular with this girl as to personal cleanliness.
Certainly. Quite right. Most important.
I mean not to be slovenly about her dress, or untidy in leaving things about.
Just so. I intended to call your attention to that. It is these little things that matter, Pickering. Take care of the pence, and the pounds will take care of themselves, as is true of personal habits as of money.
Yes, sir. Then might I ask you not to come to breakfast in your dressing-gown, or at any rate not to use it as a napkin to the extent you do, sir. And if you would be so good as to not eat everything off the same plate, and to remember not to put the porridge saucepan out of your hand on the clean tablecloth, it would be a better example to the girl. You know you nearly choked yourself with a fishbone in the jam only last week.
I may do these things sometimes, in absence of mind, but surely I don't do them habitually. By the way, my dressing-gown smells most damnably of benzine.
No doubt it does, Mr. Higgins. But if you will wipe your fingers...
Oh, very well, very well. I'll wipe them in my hair in future.
I hope you're not offended, Mr. Higgins.
Not at all, not at all. You're quite right, Mrs. Pearce. I shall be particularly careful before the girl. Is that all?
No, sir. Might she use some of those Japanese dresses you brought from abroad? I really can't put her back into her old things.
Certainly. Anything you like. Is that all?
Thank you, sir. That's all.
She goes out.
You know, Pickering, that woman has the most extraordinary ideas about me. Here I am, a shy, diffident sort of man. I've never been able to feel really grown up and tremendous like other chaps. and yet she's firmly persuaded that I'm an arbitrary, overbearing, bossing kind of person. I can't account for it.
Mrs. Pearce returns.
If you please, sir, the trouble's beginning already. There's a dustman downstairs, Alfred Doolittle, wants to see you. He says you have his daughter here.
Phew, I say.
Send the blackguard up.
Oh, very well, sir.
He may not be a blackguard, Higgins.
Nonsense, of course he's a blackguard.
Whether he is or not, I'm afraid we shall have some trouble with him.
Oh no, I think not. If there's any trouble, he shall have it with me, not I with him. And we are sure to get something interesting out of him.
About the girl?
No, I mean his dialect.
Oh.
Doolittle, sir.
She admits Doolittle and retires. Alfred Doolittle is an elderly but vigorous dustman, clad in the costume of his profession, including a hat with a back brim covering his neck and shoulders. He has well-marked and rather interesting features, and seems equally free from fear and conscience. He has a remarkably expressive voice, the result of a habit of giving vent to his feelings without reserve. His present pose is that of wounded honour and stern resolution.
Professor Higgins?
Here, good morning, sit down.
Morning, Governor. I come about a very serious matter, Governor.
Brought up in Hounslow. Mother Welsh, I should think. What do you want, Doolittle?
I want me daughter. That's what I want, see?
Of course you do. You're her father, aren't you? You don't suppose anybody else wants her, do you? I'm glad to see you have some spark of family feeling left. She's upstairs. Take her away at once.
What?
Take her away? Do you suppose I'm going to keep your daughter for you?
Now, look here, Governor. Is this reasonable? Is it fair to take advantage of a man like this? The girl belongs to me. You got her. Now, where do I come in?
Your daughter had the audacity to come to my house and ask her how to teach her how to speak properly, so that she could get a place in a flower shop. This gentleman and my housekeeper have been here all the time. How dare you come here and attempt to blackmail me? You sent her here on purpose.
No, Governor.
You must have. How else could you possibly know that she is here?
Don't take a man up like that, Governor.
The police shall take you up. This is a plant, a plot to extort money by threats. I shall telephone for the police.
He goes resolutely to the telephone and opens the directory.
Have I asked you for a brass farthing? I leave it to the gentleman here. Have I said a word about money?
What else did you come for?
Well, what would a man come for? Be human, Governor.
Alfred, did you put her up to it?
So help me, Governor, I never did. I take me Bible oath I ain't seen the girl these 2 months past.
Then how did you know she was here?
I'll tell you, Governor, if you'll only let me get a word in. I'm willing to tell you, I'm wanting to tell you, I'm waiting to tell you.
Pickering, this chap has a certain natural gift of rhetoric. Observe the rhythm of his native wood notes wild. I'm willing to tell you, I'm wanting to tell you, I'm waiting to tell you. Sentimental rhetoric. That's the Welsh strain in him. It also accounts for his mendacity and dishonesty.
Oh, please, Higgins, I'm West Country myself. How did you know the girl was here if you didn't send her?
It was like this, Governor. The girl took a boy in a taxi to give him a jaunt. Son of her landlady he is. He hung about on the chance of her giving him another ride home. Well, she sent him back for her luggage when she heard you was willing for her to stop here. I met the boy at the corner of Longacre and Endell Street.
Public house, yes.
A poor man's club, Governor. And why shouldn't I?
Do let him tell his story, Higgins.
He told me what was up. And I ask you, what was my feelings and my duty as a father? I says to the boy, you bring me the luggage, I says.
Why didn't you go for it yourself?
Landlady wouldn't have trusted me with it, Governor. She's that kind of woman, you know. I had to give the boy a penny afore he trusted me with it, the little swine. I brought it to her just to oblige you, like, and make myself agreeable, that's all.
How much luggage?
Musical instrument, Governor. Few pictures, trifle of jewellery and a bird cage. She said she didn't want no clothes. What was I to think from that, governor? I ask you as a parent, what was I to think?
So you came to rescue her from worse than death, eh?
Just so, governor. That's right.
But why did you bring her luggage if you intended to take her away?
Have I said a word about taking her away? Have I now?
You're going to take her away, double quick.
He crosses to the hearth and rings the bell.
No, governor, don't say that. I'm not the man to stand in me girl's light. Here's a career opening for her, as you might say, and...
Mrs. Pearce opens the door and awaits orders.
Mrs. Pearce, this is Eliza's father. He has come to take her away. Give her to him.
No, this is a misunderstanding. Listen here.
He can't take her away, Mr. Higgins. How can he? You told me to burn her clothes.
That's right. I can't carry the girl through the streets like a blooming monkey, can I? I put it to ya.
You have put it to me that you want your daughter. Take your daughter. If she has no clothes, go out and buy her some.
Where's the clothes she come in? Did I burn 'em or did your missus here?
I am the housekeeper, if you please. I have sent for some clothes for your girl. When they come, you can take her away. You can wait in the kitchen. This way, please.
Doolittle, much troubled, accompanies her to the door, then hesitates, finally turns confidentially to Higgins.
Listen here, governor. You and me's men of the world, ain't we?
Oh, men of the world, are we? You'd better go, Mrs. Pearce.
I think so, indeed, sir.
The floor is yours, Mr. Doolittle.
I thank you, governor. Well, the truth is, I've sort of taken a fancy to you, governor, and if you want the girl, I'm not so set on having her back home again, but what I might be open to an arrangement. Regarded in the light of a young woman, she's a fine, handsome girl. As a daughter, she's not worth her keep. And so I tell you straight, all I ask is me rights as a father, and you're the last man alive to expect me to let her go for nothing. For I can see you're one of the straight sort, governor. Well, what's a £5 note to you? And what's a Liza to me?
I think you ought to know, Doolittle, that Mr. Higgins' intentions are entirely honourable.
Course they are, governor. If I thought they weren't, I'd ask 50.
Do you mean to say, you callous rascal, that you would sell your daughter for £50?
Not in a general way, I wouldn't. But to oblige a gentleman like you, I'd do a good deal, I do assure you.
Have you no morals, man?
Can't afford 'em, governor. Neither could you if you was as poor as me. Not that I mean any harm, you know, but if Liza is going to have a bit out of this, why not me too?
I don't know what to do, Pickering. There can be no question that as a matter of morals it's a positive crime to give this chap a farthing, and yet I feel a sort of rough justice in his claim.
That's it, governor, that's all I say. A father's heart, as it were.
Well, I know the feeling, but really it seems hardly right...
Don't say that, governor. Don't look at it that way. What am I, governors both? I ask you, what am I? I'm one of the undeserving poor, that's what I am. Think of what that means to a man. It means he's up against middle-class morality all the time. If there's anything going and I put in for a bit of it, it's always the same story. You're undeserving, so you can't have it. But my needs is as great as the most deserving widows that ever got money out of 6 different charities in 1 week for the death of the same husband. I don't need less than a deserving man, I need more. I don't eat less hearty than him, and I drink a lot more. I want a bit of amusement, 'cause I'm a thinking man. I want cheerfulness and a song and a band when I feel low. Well, they charge me just the same for everything as they charge the deserving. What is middle-class morality, eh? Just an excuse for never giving me anything. Therefore, I ask you, as 2 gentlemen, not to play that game on me. I'm playing straight with you. I ain't pretending to be deserving. I'm undeserving, and I mean to go on being undeserving. I like it, and that's the truth.
Will you take advantage of a man's nature to do him out of the price of his own daughter, what he's brought up and fed and clothed by the sweat of his brow until she's growed big enough to be interesting to you gentlemen? Is £5 unreasonable? I put it to you, and I leave it to you.
Pickering, if we were to take this man in hand for 3 months, he could choose between a seat in the cabinet and a popular pulpit in Wales.
What do you say to that, Doolittle?
Not me, governor, thank you kindly. I've heard all the preachers and all the prime ministers, for I'm a thinking man, and game for politics or religion or social reform, same as all the other amusements. And I tell you, it's a dog's life any way you look at it. Undeserving poverty, that's my line. Taking one station in society with another, it's the only one that has any ginger in it to my taste.
I suppose we must give him a £5.
He'll make a bad use of it, I'm afraid.
Not me, governor, so help me I won't. Don't you be afraid that I'll save it and spare it and live idle on it. There won't be a penny of it left by Monday. I'll have to go to work same as if I'd never had it. It won't pauperise me, you bet. Just one good spree for myself and the missus, giving pleasure to ourselves and employment to others, and satisfaction to you to think it's not been throwed away. You couldn't spend it better.
This is irresistible. Let's give him 10.
He offers 2 notes to the dustman.
No, governor, she wouldn't have the heart to spend 10. And perhaps I shouldn't either. £10 is a lot of money. It makes a man feel prudent like. And then goodbye to happiness. You give me what I asked for, governor. Not a penny more and not a penny less.
Why don't you marry that missus of yours? I rather draw the line at encouraging that sort of immorality.
Tell her so, governor, tell her so. I'm willing. It's me that suffers by it. I've got no hold on her. I got to be reasonable to her. I got to give her presents. I got to buy her clothes, something sinful. I'm a slave to that woman, governor, just because I ain't her lawful husband. And she knows it too. Catch her marrying me. Huh. Take my advice, governor. Marry her Liza while she's young and don't know no better. If you don't, you'll be sorry for it after. If you do, she'll be sorry for it after. But better you than her, 'cause you're a man, and she's only a woman and don't know how to be happy anyhow.
Pickering, if we listen to this man another minute, we shall have no convictions left. £5, I think you said.
Thank you kindly, governor.
You're sure you won't take 10?
Not now. Another time, governor.
Higgins hands him a £5 note.
Here you are.
Thank you, governor. Good morning.
He hurries to the door, anxious to get away with his booty. When he opens it, he is confronted with a dainty, exquisitely clean young Japanese lady in a simple blue cotton kimono printed cunningly with small white jasmine blossoms. Mrs. Pearce is with her. He gets out of her way deferentially and apologizes.
Beg pardon, miss.
Gone. Don't you know your own daughter?
Blimey, it's Liza.
Don't I look silly?
Silly?
Now, Mr. Higgins, please don't say anything to make the girl conceited about herself.
Oh, quite right, Mrs. Pearce. Yes, damned silly.
Please, sir.
I mean extremely silly.
I should look all right with me hat on.
She takes up her hat, puts it on, and walks across the room to the fireplace with a fashionable air.
A new fashion, by George, and it ought to look horrible.
Well, I never thought she'd clean up as good-looking as that, governor. She's a credit to me, ain't she?
I tell you, it's easy to clean up here. Hot and cold water on tap, just as much as you like, there is. Woolly towels, there is. And a towel horse so hot it burns your fingers. Soft brushes to scrub yourself, and a wooden bowl of soap smelling like primroses. Now I know why ladies is so clean. Washing's a treat for 'em. Wish they saw what it is for the like of me.
I'm glad the bathroom met with your approval.
It didn't, not all of it. And I don't care who hears me say it. Mrs. Pearce knows.
What was wrong, Mrs. Pearce?
Oh, nothing, sir. It doesn't matter.
I had a good mind to break it. I didn't know which way to look, but I hung a towel over it, I did.
Over what?
Over the looking-glass, sir.
Doolittle, you have brought your daughter up too strictly.
Me? I never brought her up at all. except to give her a lick of her strap now and again. Don't put it on me, governor. She ain't accustomed to it, you see, that's all. But she'll soon pick up your free and easy ways.
I'm a good girl, I am, and I won't pick up no free and easy ways.
Eliza, if you say again that you're a good girl, your father shall take you home.
Not him. You don't know me father. All he come here for was to touch you for some money to get drunk on.
Well, what else would I want money for? To put it in the plate at church, I suppose.
She puts out her tongue at him. He is so incensed by this that Pickering presently finds it necessary to step between them.
Don't give me none of your lip, and don't let me hear you giving this gentleman any of it neither, or you'll hear about it from me, see?
Have you any further advice to give her before you go, Doolittle? Your blessing, for instance?
Nah, governor, I ain't such a mug as to put up my children to all I know myself. Hard enough to hold 'em in without that. If you want Eliza's mind improved, governor, you do it yourself with a strap. So long, gentlemen.
Stop. You'll come regularly to see your daughter. It's your duty, you know. My brother is a clergyman, and he could help you in your talks with her.
Certainly. I'll come, governor. Not just this week, 'cause I've got a job at a distance. But later on, you may depend on me. Afternoon, gentlemen. Afternoon, ma'am.
He takes off his hat to Mrs. Pearce, who disdains the salutation and goes out. He winks at Higgins, thinking him probably a fellow-sufferer from Mrs. Pearce's difficult disposition, and follows her.
Don't you believe the old liar. He'd as soon you set a bulldog on him as a clergyman. You won't see him again in a hurry.
I don't want to, Eliza. Do you?
Nor me. I don't want never to see him again, I don't. He's a disgrace to me, he is, collecting dust instead of working at his trade.
What is his trade, Eliza?
Taking money out of other people's pockets into his own. His proper trade's a navvy, and he works at it sometimes too, for exercise, and earns good money at it. Ain't you going to call me Miss Doolittle any more?
I beg your pardon, Miss Doolittle. It was a slip of the tongue.
Oh, I don't mind. Only it sounded so genteel. I should just like to take a taxi to the corner of Tottenham Court Road and get out there and tell it to wait for me, just to put the girls in their place a bit. I wouldn't speak to 'em, you know.
Better wait till we get you something really fashionable.
Besides, you shouldn't have cut your old friends now that you have risen in the world. That's what we call snobbery.
You don't call the like of them me friends now, I should hope. They've took out me often enough with their ridicule when they had the chance. And now I mean to get a bit me own back. But if I'm to have fashionable clothes, I'll wait. I should like to have some. Mrs. Pearce says you're going to give me some to wear in bed at night, different to what I wear in the daytime. But it do seem a waste of money when you could get something to show. Besides, I never could fancy changing into cold things on a winter night.
Now, Eliza, the new things have come for you to try on.
Ow!
She rushes out.
Oh, don't rush about like that, girl.
Pickering, we seem to have taken on a stiff job.
Higgins, we have.
End of Act 2. Act 3.
It is Mrs. Higgins's at-home day. Nobody has yet arrived. Her drawing-room, in a flat on Chelsea Embankment, has 3 windows looking on the river, and the ceiling is not so lofty as it would be in an older house of the same pretension. The windows are open, giving access to a balcony with flowers in pots. If you stand with your face to the windows, you have the fireplace on your left, and the door in the right-hand wall close to the corner nearest the windows. Mrs. Higgins was brought up on Morris and Burne-Jones, and her room, which is very unlike her son's room in Wimpole Street, is not crowded with furniture and little tables and knick-knacks. In the middle of the room there is a big ottoman, and this, with the carpet, the Morris wallpapers, and the Morris chintz window curtains and brocade covers of the ottoman and its cushions, supply all the ornament, and are much too handsome to be hidden by odds and ends of useless things. A few good oil paintings from the exhibitions in the Grosvenor Gallery 30 years ago, the Burne-Jones, not the Whistler side of them, are on the walls. The only landscape is a Cecil Lawson on the scale of a Rubens. There is a portrait of Mrs. Higgins as she was when she defied fashion in her youth, in one of the beautiful Rossettian costumes, which, when caricatured by people who did not understand, led to the absurdities of popular aestheticism in the 1870s. In the corner diagonally opposite the door, Mrs. Higgins, now over 60 and long past taking the trouble to dress out of the fashion, sits writing at an elegantly simple writing-table, with a bell-button within reach of her hand. There is a Chippendale chair further back in the room between her and the window nearest her side. At the other side of the room, further forward, is an Elizabethan chair roughly carved in the taste of Inigo Jones. On the same side, a piano in a decorated case. The corner between the fireplace and the window is occupied by a divan, cushioned in Morris chintz. It is between 4 and 5 in the afternoon. The door is opened violently, and Higgins enters with his hat on.
"Henry, what are you doing here today? It's my at-home day. You promised not to come."
As he bends to kiss her, she takes his hat off and presents it to him.
"Oh, bother."
He throws the hat down on the table.
"Go home at once."
"I know, Mother. I came on purpose."
"But you mustn't. I'm serious, Henry. You offend all my friends. They stop coming whenever they meet you."
"Nonsense. I know I have no small talk, but people don't mind."
"Oh, don't they? Small talk indeed. What about your large talk? Really, dear, you mustn't stay."
"I must. I've a job for you, a phonetic job."
"No use, dear. I'm sorry, but I can't get around your vowels. And though I like to get pretty postcards in your patent shorthand, I always have to read the copies in ordinary writing you so thoughtfully send me."
"Well, this isn't a phonetic job."
"You said it was."
"Not your part of it. I've picked up a girl."
"Does that mean that some girl has picked you up?"
"Not at all. I don't mean a love affair."
"What a pity."
"Why?"
"Well, you never fall in love with anyone under 45. When will you discover that there are some rather nice-looking young women about?"
"Oh, I can't be bothered with young women. My idea of a lovable woman is something as like you as possible. I shall never get into the way of seriously liking young women. Some habits lie too deep to be changed."
Rising abruptly and walking about, jingling his money and his keys in his trouser pockets.
"Besides, they're all idiots."
"Do you know what you would do if you really loved me, Henry?"
"Oh, bother. What? Marry, I suppose?"
"No, stop fidgeting and take your hands out of your pockets."
With a gesture of despair, he obeys and sits down again.
"That's a good boy. Now, tell me about the girl."
"She's coming to see you."
"I don't remember asking her."
"You didn't. I asked her. If you'd known her, you wouldn't have asked her."
"Indeed. Why?"
"Well, it's like this. She's a common flower girl. I picked her off the curbstone."
"And invite her to my at-home?"
"Oh, that'll be all right. I've taught her to speak properly. And she has strict orders as to her behaviour. She's to keep to 2 subjects, the weather and everybody's health. Fine day and how do you do, you know, and to not let herself get on things in general. That will be safe."
"Safe? To talk about our health? About our insides? Perhaps about our outsides? How could you be so silly, Henry?"
"Well, she must talk about something." "Oh, she'll be all right, don't you fuss. Pickering is in it with me. I've a sort of bet on that I'll be able to pass her off as a duchess in 6 months. I've started on her some months ago, and she's getting on like a house on fire. I shall win my bet. She has a quick ear, and she's been easier to teach than my middle-class pupils because she's had to learn a complete new language. She talks English almost as you talk French."
"That's satisfactory at all events."
"Well, it is and it isn't."
"What does that mean?"
"You see, I've got her pronunciation all right, but you have to consider not only how a girl pronounces, but what she pronounces, and that's where—"
They are interrupted by the parlour-maid, announcing guests.
"Mrs. and Miss Eynsford Hill."
"Oh, Lord."
He rises, snatches his hat from the table, and makes for the door, but before he reaches it, his mother introduces him. Mrs. and Miss Eynsford Hill are the mother and daughter who sheltered from the rain in Covent Garden. The mother is well-bred, quiet, and has the habitual anxiety of straitened means. The daughter has acquired a gay air of being very much at home in society, the bravado of genteel poverty.
"How do you do?"
"How do you do?"
"My son, Henry."
"Your celebrated son. I have so longed to meet you, Professor Higgins.
Delighted.
How do you do?
I've seen you before somewhere. I haven't the ghost of a notion where, but I've heard your voice. It doesn't matter. You'd better sit down.
I'm sorry to say that my celebrated son has no manners. You mustn't mind him.
I don't.
Not at all.
Oh, have I been rude? I didn't mean to be.
The parlour-maid returns, ushering in Pickering.
Colonel Pickering.
How do you do, Mrs. Higgins?
So glad you've come. Do you know Mrs. Eynsford Hill? Miss Eynsford Hill?
Has Henry told you what we've come for?
We were interrupted, damn it.
Oh, Henry, really?
Are we in the way?
No, you couldn't have come more fortunately. We want you to meet a friend of ours.
Yes, by George, we want 2 or 3 people. You'll do as well as anybody else.
The parlour-maid returns, ushering Freddy.
Mr. Eynsford Hill.
God of heaven, another of them.
How do you do?
Very good of you to come. Colonel Pickering?
How do you do?
I don't think you know my son, Professor Higgins.
How do you do?
I'll take my oath I've met you before somewhere. Where was it?
I don't think so.
It doesn't matter anyhow. Sit down. Well, here we are anyhow. And now, what the devil are we going to talk about until Eliza comes?
Henry, you are the life and soul of the Royal Society's soirees, but really you're rather trying on more commonplace occasions.
Am I? Very sorry. I suppose I am, you know.
I sympathise. I haven't got any small talk. If people would only be frank and say what they really think.
Lord forbid.
But why?
What they think they ought to think is bad enough, Lord knows, but what they really think would break up the whole show. Do you suppose it would be really agreeable if I were to come out now with what I really think?
Is it so very cynical?
Cynical? Who the dickens said it was cynical? I mean, it wouldn't be decent.
Oh, I'm sure you don't mean that, Mr. Higgins.
You see, we're all savages, more or less. We're supposed to be civilized and cultured, to know all about poetry and philosophy and art and science and so on. But how many of us know even the meanings of these names? What do you know of poetry? What do you know of science? What does he know of art or science or anything else? What the devil do you imagine I know of philosophy?
Or of manners, Henry.
Miss Doolittle.
Here she is, Mother.
He stands on tiptoe and makes signs over his mother's head to Eliza to indicate to her which lady is her hostess. Eliza, who is exquisitely dressed, produces an impression of such remarkable distinction and beauty as she enters that they all rise, quite flustered. Guided by Higgins's signals, she comes to Mrs. Higgins with studied grace.
How do you do, Mrs. Higgins? Mr. Higgins told me I might come.
Quite right. I'm very glad indeed to see you.
How do you do, Miss Doolittle?
Colonel Pickering, is it not?
I feel sure we have met before, Mrs. Doolittle. I remember your eyes.
How do you do?
My daughter, Clara.
How do you do?
How do you do?
I've certainly had the pleasure.
My son, Freddy.
How do you do?
By George, yes, it all comes back to me. Covent Garden. What a damn thing.
Henry, please, don't sit on my writing table. You'll break it.
Sorry.
Higgins goes to the divan, stumbling into the fender and over the fire irons on his way, extricating himself with muttered imprecations, and finishing his disastrous journey by throwing himself so impatiently on the divan that he almost breaks it. Mrs. Higgins looks at him, but controls herself and says nothing.
A long and painful pause ensues.
Will the train, do you think?
The shallow depression in the west of these islands is likely to move slowly in an easterly direction. There are no indications of any great change in the barometrical situation.
Ha ha! How awfully funny!
What is wrong with that, young man? I bet I got it right.
Killing.
I'm sure I hope it won't turn cold. There's so much influenza about. It runs right through our whole family, regularly, every spring.
My aunt died of influenza, so they said, but it's my belief they'd done the old woman in.
Done Her inn?
Yes, Lord love you. Why should she die of influenza? She come through diphtheria right enough the year before. I saw her with my own eyes. Fairly blue with it she was. They all thought she was dead. But my father, he kept ladling gin down her throat till she came to, so sudden that she bit the bowl off the spoon.
Dear me!
What call would a woman with that strength in her have to die of influenza? What become of her new straw hat that should have come to me? Somebody pinched it. And what I say is, them as pinched it done her in.
What does doing her in mean?
Oh, that's the new small talk. To do a person in means to kill them.
You surely don't believe that your aunt was killed?
Do I not? Them she lived with would have killed her for a hat pin, let alone a hat.
But it can't have been right for your father to pour spirits down her throat like that. It might have killed her.
Not her. Gin was mother's milk to her. Besides, he'd poured so much down his own throat that he knew the good of it.
Do you mean that he drank?
Drank? My word, something chronic.
How dreadful for you.
Not a bit. It never did him no harm, what I could see. But then he did not keep it up regular. On the burst, as you might say, from time to time. And always more agreeable when he'd had a drop in. When he was out of work, my mother used to give him 4pence, and tell him to go out and not come back until he'd drunk himself cheerful and loving-like. There's lots of women has to make their husbands drunk to make them fit to live with. You see, it's like this. If a man has a bit of a conscience, it always takes him when he's sober, and then it makes him low-spirited. A drop of booze just takes that off and makes him happy. Here, what are you sniggering at?
The new small talk. You do it so awfully well.
If I was doing it proper, what was you laughing at? Have I said anything I oughtn't?
Not at all, Miss Doolittle.
Well, that's a mercy anyhow. What I always say is...
Ahem.
Well, I must go.
They all rise. Freddy goes to the door.
So pleased to have met you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Colonel Pickering.
Goodbye, Miss Doolittle.
Goodbye, all.
Are you walking across the park, Miss Doolittle? If so...
Walk? Not bloody likely. I am going in a taxi.
Pickering gasps and sits down. Freddy goes out on the balcony to catch another glimpse of Eliza.
Well, I really can't get used to the new ways.
Oh, it's all right, Mamma. Quite right. People will think we never go anywhere or see anybody if you're so old-fashioned.
I dare say I am very old-fashioned, but I do hope you won't begin using that expression, Clara. I have got accustomed to hear you talking about men as rotters, and calling everything filthy and beastly, though I do think it horrible and unladylike. But this last is really too much. Don't you think so, Colonel Pickering?
Don't ask me. I've been away in India for several years, and manners have changed so much that I sometimes don't know whether I'm at a respectable dinner table or in a ship's forecastle.
It's all a matter of habit. There's no right or wrong in it. Nobody means anything by it. And it's so quaint, and gives such a smart emphasis to things that are not in themselves very witty. I find the new small talk delightful and quite innocent.
Well, after that, I think it's time for us to go.
Oh, yes. We have 3 at-homes to go to still. Goodbye, Mrs. Higgins. Goodbye, Colonel Pickering. Goodbye, Professor Higgins.
Goodbye. Be sure you try on that small talk at the 3 at-homes. Don't be nervous about it. Pitch it in strong.
I will. Goodbye. Such nonsense. All this Victorian prudery.
Such damned nonsense.
Such bloody nonsense.
Clara!
She goes out radiant, conscious of being thoroughly up-to-date, and is heard descending the stairs in a stream of silvery laughter.
Well, I ask you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Would you like to meet Miss Doolittle again?
Yes, I should most awfully.
Well, you know my days.
Yes, thanks awfully. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Higgins.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
It's no use. I shall never be able to bring myself to use that word.
Don't. It's not compulsory, you know. You'll get on quite well without it.
Only Clara is so down on me if I'm not positively reeking with the latest slang. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You mustn't mind, Clara.
Pickering, catching from her lowered tone that this is not meant for him to hear, discreetly joins Higgins at the door.
We're so poor. And she gets so few parties, poor child. She doesn't quite know.
Mrs. Higgins, seeing that her eyes are moist, takes her hand sympathetically, and goes with her to the door.
But the boy is nice. Don't you think so?
Oh, quite nice. I shall always be delighted to see him.
Thank you, dear. Goodbye.
She goes out.
Well, is Eliza presentable?
You silly boy, of course she's not presentable. She's a triumph of your art and of her dressmakers, but if you suppose for a moment that she doesn't give herself away in every sentence she utters, you must be perfectly cracked about her.
But don't you think something might be done? I mean, something to eliminate the sanguinary element from her conversation?
Not as long as she's in Henry's hands.
Do you mean that my language is improper?
No, dearest, it would be quite proper, say, on a canal barge, but it would not be proper for her at a garden party.
Well, I must say...
Come, Higgins, you must learn to know yourself. I haven't heard such language as yours since we used to review the volunteers in Hyde Park 20 years ago.
Oh, well, if you say so, I suppose I don't always talk like a bishop.
Colonel Pickering, will you tell me what is the exact state of things in Wimpole Street?
Well, I've come to live here with Henry. We work together at my Indian dialects, and we think it more convenient...
Quite so, I'll know all about that. It's an excellent arrangement. But where does this girl live?
With us, of course. Where would she live?
But on what terms? Is she a servant? If not, what is she?
I think I know what you mean, Mrs. Higgins.
Well, dash me if I do. I've had to work at the girl every day for months to get her to her present pitch. Besides, she's useful. She knows where my things are, and remembers my appointments and so forth.
How does your housekeeper get on with her?
Mrs. Pearce? Oh, she's jolly glad to have so much taken off her hands. For before Eliza came, she had to find things and remind me of my appointments. But she's got some silly bee in her bonnet about Eliza. She keeps saying, "You don't think, sir," doesn't she, Pick?
Yes, that's the formula. You don't think so. That's the end of every conversation about Eliza.
As if I ever stop thinking about the girl and her confounded vowels and consonants. I'm worn out thinking about her and watching her lips and her teeth and her tongue, not to mention her soul, which is the quaintest of the lot.
You certainly are a pretty pair of babies, playing with your live doll.
Playing? The hardest job I ever tackled. Make no mistake about that, Mother. But you have no idea how frightfully interesting it is to take a human being and change her into a quite different human being by creating a new speech for her. It's filling up the deepest gulf that separates class from class and soul from soul.
Yes, it's enormously interesting. I assure you, Mrs. Higgins, we take Eliza very seriously. Every week, every day almost, there is some new change. We keep records of every stage, dozens of gramophone discs and photographs.
Yes, by George, it's the most absorbing experiment I ever tackled. She regularly fills our lives up, doesn't she, Pick?
We're always talking Eliza.
Teaching Eliza.
Dressing Eliza.
What?
Inventing new Elizas. You know she has the most extraordinary quickness of ear.
I assure you, my dear Mrs. Higgins, that girl...
Just like a parrot. I've tried her with...
is a genius. She can play the piano quite beautifully.
Every possible sort of sound that a human being can make.
We have taken her to classical concerts and to music.
Continental dialects, African dialects, Hottentot,
halls, and it's all the same to her. She plays everything.
Glicks, things it took me years to get hold of, and
she hears right off when she comes home, whether it's...
picks them up like a shot, right away, as if she had...
Beethoven and Brahms or Lehar and Lionel Monkton.
Been at it her whole life.
Though 6 months ago she'd never as much as touched a piano.
Shh, 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 shh.
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, when Pickering starts shouting, nobody can get a word in edgeways.
Be quiet, Henry. Colonel Pickering, don't you realise that when Eliza walked into Wimpole Street, something walked in with her?
Her father did, but Henry soon got rid of him.
It would have been more to the point if her mother had. But as her mother didn't, something else did.
But what?
A problem.
Oh, I see. The problem of how to pass her off as a lady.
I'll solve that problem. I've half solved it already.
No, you two infinitely stupid male creatures. The problem of what's to be done with her afterwards.
I don't see anything in that. She can go her own way with all the advantages I've given her.
The advantages of that poor woman who was here just now. The manners and habits that disqualify a fine lady from earning her own living without giving her a fine lady's income. Is that what you mean?
Oh, that'll be all right, Mrs. Higgins.
We'll find her some light employment.
She's happy enough. Don't you worry about her. Goodbye.
Anyhow, there's no good bothering now. The thing's done. Goodbye, Mother.
There are plenty of openings. We'll do what's right. Goodbye.
Let's take her to the Shakespeare exhibition at Earl's Court.
Yes, let's. Her remarks will be delicious.
She'll mimic all the people for us when we get her.
Ripping.
Mrs. Higgins rises with an impatient bounce and returns to her work at the writing table. She sweeps a litter of disarranged papers out of her way, snatches a sheet of paper from her stationery case, and tries resolutely to write. At the third line she gives it up, flings down her pen, grips the table angrily, and exclaims,
"Oh, men, men, men!"
End of Act 3.